Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. After practice today, where the Celtics finalized their roster. In some ways, Ime Udoka said we were going to get news on the roster by the end of the day, and we did. Just a few minutes ago, Celtics officially announcing that Jabari Parker got waived. Surprising news. I wouldn't say stunning. I mean, this is a guy, obviously, with a $2 million salary this year that was going to have that fully guaranteed over in January. About $1 million of it due on opening night. So Celtics get out of a player with just $100,000 dead money here. So in terms of flexibility, if there was a time to do it, it was now. And if they weren't overly impressed or confident in a role that Parker was going to serve the Celtics here, then I'm not stunned. I am surprised, though. Parker shot only 40% from the field, but flashed a nice dunk, hit 3 out of 6 of his threes. I think averaged 7 points a game in 14 minutes, so that amounts to 20 points per 36. Fairly efficient scorer in his time with the Celtics. Played quite a bit in that playoff series against the Brooklyn Nets in the spring, and averaged 10 points a game, I believe it was, on 61% shooting. So overall, Parker's tenure with the Celtics, and I said this on the Garden Report last week, if you said at the time when he got taken on as a Flyer late last season, all right, this is what we're going to get from Parker, and then you laid out what he ultimately gave the team, and it was 8.5 points per game in that playoff series, you would have probably said, all right, for a 15th man on the roster, I don't think there's a better 15th man across basketball. With his scoring pedigree at the very least. Now, defensively, he wasn't going to be able to become a regular contributor to the Celtics. His movement did not look good, kind of hunched over, not explosive in his movements at all. But you put him out there and he was able to find his way downhill to the basket and score regularly. So sort of a good break glass guy for the Celtics if they were down in a game and needed more offensive lineups, I felt like this year. Showed some ability to play the 4 in the postseason, though. Maybe his standing as a 5 on this team. That's kind of a loaded position right now. Cantor, Williams, Horford didn't open up the possibility of him being able to impact the game as much as maybe a point guard. And I did say, especially in that second two-way spot that's coming into focus now, that the Celtics were going to need some sort of emergency point guard solution there. And maybe they'll end up using the 15th roster spot on that. So Parker out. Unclear how they're going to address that going forward. I know for Brad Stevens in that two-way spot, seeing the cuts around the NBA leading up to opening day was going to be a big deal for the Celtics in that regard. They cut many of their training camp players as well. In fact, all of their training camp players have been released at this point. Garrison Matthews, according to Jared Weiss, is not going to be headed to Maine, unlike a number of other Celtics players here, like Ryan Arcidiacono, Juwan Morgan, I believe, is Maine bound. A number of those guys are going to be under the Maine umbrella, as Udoka put it today. So we'll see if any of them end up actually officially signing with the not the Red Claws anymore, the Maine Celtics. But it doesn't look like Garrison Matthews is heading in that direction, and according to Weiss, actually declined a two-way deal with the Celtics. So it seemed like the hope with him, in my mind earlier today, was that, all right, we like Parker, Matthews brings some shooting that the Celtics need, and he didn't play a lot in the preseason, which surprised me. Maybe you can have the best of both worlds, and Matthews agrees to a two-way deal, and Parker stays on that 15th spot. That's not happening, and you would have thought things would be lined up for Matthews to immediately join the Celtics in that 15th spot if he did beat out Parker somehow, but Weiss said he's going to look around the league for some deals. So Matthews, as of now, not lined up for that 15th man spot. Number of guys that are, though, if you look around the league right now. Clippers had Harry Giles. Harry Giles obviously came into this league with enormous pedigree at the center position and has bounced around a bit, had 2 severe knee injuries that have hampered his athleticism. 6'11", 240. Last year averaged 3 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, and shot 43% from the field. So he struggled last season while posting a negative net rating. So Giles, not in a strong position to succeed, but still 23 years old. I've said the Celtics more and more need to start turning over the young flyer prospects on their roster. If you don't think Carson Edwards is working, move on and flip in another prospect who didn't work in another location. Now, Giles hasn't worked in 2 locations at this point between Sacramento and Portland, but still young enough, has that connection to Tatum, and still has the pedigree that makes it worth looking at with a 15th spot on the roster. He's obviously number 1 on this wish list, and shout out to some of my colleagues at Celtics blog who threw that one out there today. Tremont Waters is back out there if that interests you. Sort of as that emergency point guard prospect. I don't suspect he would get a regular NBA contract, so I don't think it's going to be Waters. You look at some of the big men. Devontae Cacok was with the Nets, got released. Saw him in Summer League. Big, burly type. Sort of redundant with Bruno Fernando, I would say. So, Cacok, not on my radar. Marquise Chris has tried out a couple locations. I think he fits the Giles pedigree there of a top prospect who's been in a couple different locations at this point. Played with some athleticism, but he went to the Warriors and didn't succeed. So, that's a red flag for me. MJ Walker's a guy covered in college, Florida State shooter. He's bounced around a couple different teams in camp so far, I believe, and hasn't stuck on anywhere yet. I believe the latest was the Knicks, if I'm correct. So he's a shooter. I loved his shot in college, but he might end up going to the Knicks G League system here. And a number of these guys are on Exhibit 10 contracts, which are kind of meant to guide you to the G League, give you a bonus to stay there for some amount of time and play within the organization before you maybe find another location. Who else? Cassius Stanley. He was in the Detroit camp this offseason. Don't see great NBA potential from him, although he's a great guy in the room. I think you're looking for more of a flyer with great upside. Brandon Goodwin, the former Hawks guard, was someone who the Celtics worked out earlier this offseason. He was in Knicks camp as well and got cut. So we'll keep an eye on him. That wouldn't be a terrible route to go. He's played a little bit of NBA basketball at this point in his career. Alex Antetokounmpo, do you go in that direction? I believe the Raptors waived him, but he is headed for Raptors 905, so he will not be available. I love that he's there, by the way, in that developmental system. Joel Ayayi, cut by the Lakers, maybe head to their G League system. Good shooter, ball handler, guy I liked in the second round for the Celtics, who was available, but ultimately Juwan Begarin. Glad I don't have to say that too much yet. he was the guy that the Celtics ultimately picked there. Mfiondu Kabengele, another Florida State guy, shooter, sort of a Gershon Yabusele type, slasher, big body, small ball 5. He's been with the Clippers. I believe he was in Cavaliers camp this year, so he is out there. Wouldn't hate a flyer on him. Looks like he's got some versatility, but can he get in great shape, I guess is the question with him. Jahlil Okafor is also out there as well. I think that one's been kind of played out so far. But if the Celtics do want a flyer big man, guess it's a possibility. He was with the Hawks and Nets this offseason after being dealt from the Pistons. And then, of course, the Grizzlies cut Carson Edwards and Chris Dunn at the end of camp here. So you want to bring back Carson Edwards just to have in the room and know what you got in a guy like that? I guess so. The other option, obviously, too, is to just not sign anybody for that 15th spot. And you need to bring in 2 guys in a trade this season, you're able to do that. If you find someone later in the year who you love, if an international season ends overseas and a guy comes over that you love from the international game, maybe Begarin. Who knows? But the Celtics do curiously cut Jabari Parker today, which makes me think that they maybe have an eye on somebody who became available within the last few days. The big one is Tyrell Terry. He was drafted less than 12 months ago when we think of when the 2020 NBA draft was. Obviously, the timeline's all screwed up. Just about a year ago, we were just coming off the NBA Finals, and then you get into the 2020 draft. Terry was regarded as one of the best 2 to 5 shooters in the draft. Got picked number 31 by the Dallas Mavericks. Celtics had a chance to take him with their second first-round pick that ultimately became Peyton Pritchard. But Terry didn't do much during his rookie season. Didn't produce much at all, didn't carve out a role in Dallas. Took a couple leaves of absences that he told a podcast down in Dallas was due to mental health issues. He actually said that within the last couple of weeks at Mavericks training camp in late September, and then left the team again on October 2nd. And ultimately the Mavericks decided to part ways with him ahead of his non-guaranteed years of his rookie contract here. So they ate the second year of his rookie deal. Obviously third and fourth are non-guaranteed for rookies. So Terry, shooting pedigree, major pedigree, and less than 12 months ago got taken in an NBA draft. So Celtics now have a spot on their roster to take a flyer on him. You know, just completely non-guaranteed money. They could go in that direction. Terry obviously needs to address whatever personal issues he's going through, but maybe the Celtics are willing and in a better position to give him the time to do that and bring him into this team if that's the direction that they want to go in right now. So Terry, Giles, the two guys I'm looking at right now, and we'll see who else becomes available within the next couple of days here as teams finally start to set their final rosters. Other notes on the Celtics roster, heading into opening night, Sam Hauser obviously filled in as their first two-way player spot. Theo Pinson, who shot 35% in the preseason, looked a little heavier than he did to me at UNC. Not the light, agile slasher that he really endeared himself to me as in college. A great leader on that Tar Heels team. I love the way Theo Pinson, as a bigger point guard, point forward really, with that UNC squad, was able to command the floor and make plays for them, as well as defend. I wouldn't hate him as a two-way player. He has played NBA games at this point with the Knicks and Nets, and, you know, could be an emergency point guard per se on the Celtics team. They waived him. He is still in play for that two-way spot, according to that Weiss report today. So if the Celtics want to go with Theo Pinson as their second two-way player, I have no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, if you told me at the beginning of this offseason that Pinson would be the guy at that second two-way spot, I'd actually be pretty happy about it just because of the pedigree he brings from college. And again, I say that word over and over again. When I saw guys who were great in college, when I saw guys who obviously have great basketball potential at their core and just didn't work in other locations, I think in the NBA, you can end up in a right fit at the right time and start to gain traction, whereas other guys end up in the completely wrong spot to start their career and fizzle out. So that's the latest on the Celtics roster. Everything else as it stands, set to go. They have 14 players for opening night, and Jaylen Brown, Al Horford still in question, so it could be a 13-man or 12-man bench depending on how things shake out with the COVID availability on the Celtics right now. So Celtics, Knicks, New York City on Wednesday. We'll have more coverage leading up to that. And check out some of the things that the Celtics said at practice today as well in our second video here out of Celtics practice today. So I'm Bobby Manning for the Garden Report, Celtics CLNS Media. Check us out at Celtics CLNS and me at Real Bob Manning, and all our reports at clnsmedia.com. We will see you from Celtics practice tomorrow.